Ladies and gents, Happy New Year and welcome to the December update on the performance of my solar array. So I've got a surprise in store for you in this update, so stay tuned and somewhere in the video I will tell you all about it. So let's get cracking. First of all, the disclaimer, I'm not an expert, please get qualified advice if you want to do any of these things. Right, first of all let's talk about the grid supply issue. So last month I talked about my voltage supply being too high. So normal equipment in your house is expecting to receive 230 volts. The legal limit is plus 10% minus 6%, so that gives them a range of 216 to 253 volts in which they can supply voltage legally, and the majority of your gadgets are designed to work in that range. Give Energy is designed to trip out if it receives voltage of 257 volts or above, and I noticed that Enphase does a similar thing at around the same voltage. So as you can see here from this graph, the crazy blue line is the voltage that I'm receiving at my property. UK Power Networks aims to deliver 242 volts to you, but you can see on average I'm getting somewhere between 245 and 250. But voltage is never consistent, so it's constantly fluctuating and spiking. So I first noticed there was something wrong in March with help from Give Energy. So it was tripping out the inverter in this range, and they did nothing about. When I reported it to UK Power Networks, they did nothing. But then again, I started to notice a problem at the end of November, and having spoken to Give Energy, they said it's a voltage problem, and I didn't realize that Give Energy is capturing all this data. So I was able to download it and put it into a graph, and you can see here that towards the end of November and beginning of December, something dramatic changed in the voltage that we're receiving, and so the average was about 255 or 253 at the legal limit, and you can see we were spiking up to 270. So this was causing the inverter to kind of shut down and go into safety mode. That meant the battery wasn't charging or discharging, our solar surplus was being diverted into our hot water, or we were pulling power from the grid to meet our demand. So not ideal. So during the whole month of December, UK Power Networks failed to show up or do anything. I constantly phoned them every few days for an update. In the end, Ofgem said just raise a complaint with them, then the clock is ticking and they have to get back to you. And I heard nothing all the way through Christmas. This problem happened, multiple times a week. It was tripping everything out, and it wouldn't work properly. So some of our data this month is going to be not very good. But then literally 2 or 3 days ago, I had a response from them, and they said that they're sending an engineer to the substation to tap down the voltage some point during this week. So I'll let you know if it has any kind of impact. Right, let's move on into the usual data that you're expecting to see. Our solar array in the month of December produced 87.4 kilowatts. We exported 4.3. We imported 901, and that meant our house used 984 kilowatts. Now, I will say that there is a bit of a larger discrepancy than normal in these numbers compared to what Octopus tells us, our energy provider that we used, and I put that back down to the grid voltage. If it's tripping out the Enphase equipment, then it's not recording what's going on properly. But that's the gist of it. As you can see, our demand is significantly higher than what the solar array is producing. Now in December we had snow in London which settled, which is highly unusual, and it settled for about a week. So some of our solar panels were covered in snow and therefore couldn't do anything, and the rest of the time it was pretty gloomy because the skies were heavy with dark clouds. So even if it's cloudy, the solar array can produce something, but if there's dark clouds it just goes down to zero. So that's why you can see we have terrible production on some of the days, and it's not meeting our demand. In terms of energy independence, this equates to about 8% energy independence, and you can see on the right hand side it's the solar panels on the front of our house facing east which are producing the most, and the ones on the back facing west are doing next to nothing. In terms of the best and the worst days, so December 26th was our best day. We produced 8.8 kilowatts. But what you see here on all the days in December is I've got the systems programmed to charge up overnight on the Octopus Go tariff because there simply isn't enough solar power to get through the day. So what we have is the battery charging up as much as it can in those 4 hours. It will never get to 100% because the capacity is greater than what it can do at 3 kilowatts. And we have the My Energy system heating our hot water in both our tanks via the Immersion heater. The reason I've programmed this is because the nighttime Octopus Go tariff is cheaper than the gas tariff. So whatever I can get out of electricity is going to save us that little bit in terms of gas. In the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make a huge dent, but every penny helps. And in addition to that, on some days we are charging the car overnight during that same tariff. So most days have huge draw overnight like this. The worst day was the 19th of December. We only produced 0.1 of a kilowatt. So I think this is one of those snowy days, doom and gloom days where nothing much is happening. And again, we're pulling power overnight, but the battery's not going to make it through the day. And then again, around 6 p.m, our battery's dead, and the remaining power is coming from the grid at peak rate, unfortunately. Okay, moving on. So the performance of our array, this chart over here on the right hand side is the December edition. So you can see from the different colours what the contribution is month on month. The lighter the colour, the kind of lighter bluey colours means higher production, and the darker colours kind of closer to black means low production. Okay, household electricity consumption. So the December metrics look slightly different, so let me explain what's going on. So first of all, the solar array produced 87 kilowatts. Now Enphase says we exported 4, but Octopus says we exported 8. So based on what Octopus says, our house consumed 79 kilowatts of the production from the solar array. We then pulled 582 kilowatts from the grid to service our house, all the usual things like the computer, the Wi-Fi, the TV, whatever. And then in addition, we pulled 216 kilowatts from the grid to service our eddy and heat hot water, and an additional 137 kilowatts from the grid to charge the car. So the difference compared to prior months is the blue, the orange and the red in the month of December is all power which came from the grid. In the earlier months, the orange and the red is power which is coming from surplus solar. I'll find a way going forward to kind of distinguish between the two, but I'm voicing over it for now. So our demand is slightly higher, but if you look at it month on month, our pull from the grid for regular household stuff is comparable to previous December or the one before. It's a fraction higher. We've probably got some heaters running because it's absolutely freezing, and the minute you turn the central heating off, the heat was just escaping. I mean, what this did reveal is that our house is surprisingly draftier than we thought. So when it was sub-zero, I was going around finding all the drafts and trying to seal them up with draft excluder and things like that. Okay, moving on to gas consumption. So we did consume an awful lot of gas in December, the highest of all the data that I've captured here. The main portion of our house used less than the side portion of our house, which faces north. And this is partly because, it really doesn't get any heat from sunlight because it's north facing. And I think we've got some drafts somewhere that I still need to track down. On the main portion of our house, we had cavity wall insulation installed at the beginning of December, so maybe that's helping. The side portion of our house, although it's an extension built 20 years ago, the guy who came to assess for cavity wall did say that the insulation that was put in is starting to lag, and so there's gaps forming in there. So it's not as efficient as it could be. But the guy said because that insulation was put in when the extension was built, it's very hard for him to suck it out in order to then put in fresh cavity wall insulation, which are these little bead things that they pump in. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment. All right, the tiny little segment at the top is the 216 kilowatts of gas equivalent. So if we had been pulling all of our power in the normal way from gas, this is how much we would have used, but we saved this in terms of gas because we used electricity instead for that little segment. Okay, moving on, so let's look at the bill. So the north-facing portion of our house used £343 worth of gas, and that is after a rebate from the government of about £140 because of the energy cap. The side portion of our house, the main portion of our house used £260 worth of gas, and the entire house consumed £120 worth of electricity. The split is roughly 50% of this is coming from the Octopus Go nighttime tariff, and the remainder is coming from the Octopus peak time tariff. You can see we got paid 32p to export to 8 kilowatts back to the grid, and here in the UK the government is giving a £67 rebate per month for 6 months over the winter period to assist with the bills. This is in addition to the £140-ish kind of rebate that we got here because of the cap. So we're getting kind of two lots of help at the moment from the government. And this is nothing special. I think basically everybody is eligible for these two things. There is additional assistance available if you are on low income and meet all of their criteria. But unfortunately, we're not, so we don't get any more help. But every little helps. Okay, so if you want to switch to Octopus, first of all of their energy provided is green. So if that motivates you, then feel free to use the link that you see here on the screen, or give them a call and quote that reference number. Both you and I will receive £50 off our next bill. If you have an electric car, or you're about to get one, and you want to charge it up on the cheap rate overnight, then again, you might want to consider switching to Octopus. And in my case, I have a battery, and so I can also charge my battery on that rate overnight. I understand from some other people that they've updated their terms and conditions to say the Octopus Go tariff is only if you have a car, an electric car, but charging the battery in an electric car and charging a battery in your house, it's the same thing. You're collecting electricity and storing it for use later on. But anyway, that's my opinion. You're very welcome to use the link, and a big thank you to all of you who have been using the link. I can see those referrals coming through, and I definitely appreciate. All right, let's talk about my energy. So as I said, I have programmed the Eddy to heat our hot water every single night. Both immersion heaters run in those 4 hours and heat the two separate water tanks that we've got. So this is what the graph looks like. The taller lines that you see here in the kind of white colour is the second immersion tank, and the smaller lines you see here in the more greeny colour is our main immersion tank. So the main one actually consumes less power. The reason is that tank has a top-mounted immersion heater, whereas the other tank has a side-mounted immersion heater. The difference is that heat rises, so the water at the top of the tank heats up first, and then the immersion heater trips out, even though the water at the bottom of the tank is still cold. But this tank doesn't have a immersion heater also fitted at the bottom. So what it means is we're only heating a portion of the tank. And then the Eddy switches over to the other tank and manages to heat the whole thing because the immersion heater is mounted on the side much lower down. So it's a bit of a problem here. Back in the summer, we had an issue with the main tank where the immersion heater would never stop because the thermostat was broken. So we got that repaired, and now we've moved the other extreme in that it's tripping out too early because it's mounted at the top. Now, we have no access directly above our water cylinder. There's a staircase. And so to replace the immersion thermostat, we had to drain down the system and pull the whole tank out in order to do it. Now, in hindsight, this tank is like 20 years old. I don't think it's the best. While they were pulling it out, it probably would have been wise to replace the tank and then get a side-mounted immersion element. But it didn't occur to me, and the plumber didn't suggest it. So now that they've put it all back together and we've discovered this problem, we're paying duplicate labour again if we ask them to replace the tank. So I've been looking into solutions, and what I can do is get a destratification pump, and that can be connected to the Eddy. So when the immersion on the main tank trips out to say it's at temperature, what it does is trigger the destratification pump to start. And what that does is it circulates water from the top of your tank down to the bottom. So it mixes it all together, and then the thermostat will close, which means you've got a complete circuit, and therefore the immersion will start up again and heat the water. So I asked my plumber to do this before Christmas, but I didn't hear back from him. So I will get onto it this month and see if we can get this sorted out. All right, so if you're finding this content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I'm trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber target, and we are really, really close. So, installer estimates versus reality. I'm still really positive numbers, but December hasn't made much of an impact. We're down here on 95% consumption. The reason it's dropped a little bit is because we've been having these voltage problems, and it's been causing the data to not kind of record properly. And we've been exporting surplus when we would otherwise capture it because the battery's not charging up. And likewise, our consumption, we're still blowing the estimates, but not really any change compared to last month because we've had so little production. Energy independence, we're down on 10%. It's really poor, but it's comparable to December of the previous year. Slightly worse because we've had snow, which we didn't have last December. And also the data might be a little bit off because of our voltage problems. Peak power, down at averaging at 1 kilowatt, which is a bit better than December of last year. And the temperature correlation again makes, I can't see the pattern here apart from the obvious, but this is where we're at. All right, let's get on to the last page and then the payback curve. So I said to you, first of all, that I had a surprise for you. So my surprise is that I've spent more money. I know I keep saying that I'm not going to, but on the back of doing the 12-month summary, which I shared last month on the performance of our array, the £3,000 that we had saved in that first year by having all of this equipment made us realise that when the sun is in a completely south orientation, all of our panels are doing nothing. And that's, around the middle of the day at the best possible point, because the south-facing elevation is on our neighbour's house, not ours. So we have a summer house in the garden, and when the original installers came round, I did suggest to them that they can put panels on the roof, but the guy was very quick to dismiss it. Now, he didn't take time to understand that our summer house already has power, and the summer house already has a consumer unit in it with plenty of spare fuses. So, having looked at all the numbers, we determined that if we make a small investment to fit a few panels on our summer house, what we can do is, of course, top up our production, but make sure we've got some production coming in the middle of the day at the best possible point. And, of course, that roof faces south, so it's going to be capturing sunlight for the majority of the day. So, I will talk more about that in a moment, but first of all, let's get through the numbers. So we've spent £23,492 now on all this equipment. Our solar panels have saved us £1,660. We've saved £1,490 by not purchasing diesel. Our eddy has saved us £64 by using free electricity or cheap electricity to heat our hot water. We have earned £5.39 from selling our surplus back to the grid. And we have saved £401 by using the cheap Octopus Go rate overnight to charge up the battery and charge up the car versus paying peak time rates. It's cost us £231 to charge the car, so that's either by purchasing electricity on the daytime or the nighttime tariff at home, or by using the public network. So I'm offsetting the savings from diesel by the costs of charging the car. We were using the public network a bit more than normal because we had a bit of credit from the manufacturer to use up, which expired in January about now. So we were trying to get through it. So that leaves us a total OPEX savings of £3,389. We have a balance of £20,102 to break even. Our payback so far of the entire system, including the new expenditure, is 14.4%. And we forecast to pay back in 7 years and 11 months. Let's run through the numbers in the December column. So I said earlier the array produced 87 kilowatts. We exported 8, and this number comes from our meter readings. Therefore, the house consumed 79 kilowatts. Enphase says we imported 901 kilowatts from the grid, but our supplier says we imported 934. So you can see there's a discrepancy of 33 kilowatts there due to the system tripping out because of the voltage issue. So this house consumed 79 kilowatts of green energy. We bought 216 kilowatts of energy from Octopus on the cheap rate to heat the hot water. We bought 136 kilowatts to charge the car on the cheap rate. The house overall used 5,914 kilowatts of gas equivalent, and that includes the portion going into the eddy. But pure gas, we purchased 5,697 kilowatts, and that's basically going to our cooking and our central heating. So CapEx, we've spent £1,875 on our new equipment. So our total again is £23,492. There's a bit of a rounding issue going on here somewhere. As far as I'm aware, our unit rates have stayed the same, and therefore we have saved £24.48 in the month of December from our solar array. We have saved £6.07 on the eddy. We've saved £214 of diesel. We have earned 32p by exporting electricity. We have saved £165 by using the cheap rate on Octopus Go. we have spent £66.66 charging the electric car. So total OPEX savings were £343 for the month of December. So our cumulative total is £3,389 and therefore £20,102 to reach payback. So as I said before, 14% of the system is paid back. The forecast on a linear basis is 7 years and 11 months. This is including the new expenditure. If I remove the new expenditure, the forecast was 7 years and 3 months. And therefore our energy independence for the month of December was 8%, according to Enphase. So the graph in the background is still not exciting, but if the most important points, it says yellow line up here at the top is our capital expenditure, and the green line here is our OPEX savings. We want the green line to catch up with the yellow line. When we do that, we've broken even, and when the green line overtakes the yellow line, we are saving money or making money by having all this equipment. So I know we still have a long way to go, but 7 years payback for all of this is pretty good, and that is why we thought it's a good idea to get a few more panels where we can make them point south, because what it's going to do is enable this green line to increase the rate at which it's working and catching up with that gold line. Okay, well that's it for this month. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe. I'm interested in your figures, especially those of you who already have panels, particularly with the snow. I want to see what kind of impact it's had to some of you in different parts of the country. But if you are interested in hearing more about the new solar panels that I put on, stay tuned, because I'm going to talk about it now. So, 4 new solar panels. The ones I bought are made by Jinko Solar, and they are from the Tiger series. They're all black and they are 380 watts each. I also bought 4 new Enphase microinverters, okay, IQ7 pluses to add into the system. All the other equipment stays the same. On this page, the only thing I've done is update the unit price for gas. So last time I showed you this, it was different. In terms of the schematic, there's 2 changes here to draw your attention to. First of all is the envoy. On the previous one, I had the envoy positioned over here in line, but as I was digging into this, I discovered that's not actually how it's wired up. This envoy is wired into this junction box over here. So I've updated the wiring diagram to point it here. It makes absolutely no difference in the end. I was just trying to be accurate. So the new solar panels I've got, Jinko Tiger 380 watts, 4 of those, plus 4 Enphase IQ7 pluses. All of this is connected into an isolator. After the isolator, we have a My Energy CT clamp. And then this cable is connected into our main consumer unit. Now, the reason it's in our main consumer unit is, like I said, the summer house already had power, and that power is being drawn from the main consumer unit. I could have plumbed it into the sub-main, but that would involve running a new cable from the summer house all the way back into the house, or adjusting this. There's absolutely no reason for it, because as you can see, power flows in all directions through the Henley block and through the consumer units. It just works. So this made it simple. Okay, so now if you want to know how I actually figured this out and decided to do it, the first thing is you need a bit of space to work on, a bit of roof space or somewhere you want to put this solar array. So here's my summer house. This is what this is the roof. The roof tiles here are fixed. You can't kind of lift them up once they're installed. They're all kind of interlocked. The tiles are about 3 millimeters thick, something like that. Underneath the tiles is kind of the wood for the roof, the slats, and they are maybe 8, 9, 10 millimeters thick. And then that's it. They all rest on kind of 3 joists overall, and I'll show you that in a moment. Here it is, with the installation underway. So the first step is to install the rails on which the panel sits. The next step then was to get the second rail up there at the top, and we installed the Enphase IQ7 pluses to the rail. Now, we were taking our time in doing this over the holidays, so I've put a plastic bag around them at the end of the day, just to make sure no water gets in there. They are IP rated anyway, but I just wanted to be extra careful. Then the next day we got the panels on, clamped them down. So here it is, almost done. This is another angle of the same thing. And then the final thing we did was add bird mesh. So here's the bird mesh added on, and we've put little end caps on just to make it all look nice and neat. Now, as I said, December was doom and gloom, so I'm sorry I couldn't take better pictures, but this is what I've got for now. So let's talk to you about the shopping list. So here's the shopping list. I bought the majority of the equipment from Midsummer. The reason I went with Midsummer is, one, because I needed a very particular sized panel to try and make everything fit on the roof space that I've got available. And Midsummer had panels of the right size, and they were in stock, and they could be delivered before Christmas. Now, the dimensions of my panel are so particular that the majority of panels out there wouldn't fit. So my first objective was to use the Trina solar panels that I've already got on the main roof and get the same ones again, but they were too big. So that's why I've ended up with these Jinko ones. And if you think about the wattage for the dimensions, it's a pretty good ratio. On the right hand side, you kind of see a repeat of the Midsummer shopping list, but there's a few other bits and pieces that I got from local stores. So from Wix, we need to add another joist to the roof, a few bolts and brackets and things. TLC is my local electrical distributor, so I like to buy all my kind of bits and pieces from there. So I've got some stuff there. And then from Amazon, we got some bird mesh clips and some internet Ethernet cable to get that MyEnergy CT clamp hooked up. So this is the entire shopping list to get everything done, basically. So let me talk to you about how I did it. So first of all, you need a bit of space where you can put solar panels. So the summer house in the garden, it's obviously got a pitched roof, two sides to it. Each side is 4.3 meters by 2.12 meters. So this is the square of the south-facing elevation, and off to the top here is the other half of the roof facing north. But we don't want to put solar panels on the north. If you're in the northern hemisphere, then you want panels based on your southern roofs. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you would then want to put solar panels on your north-facing roofs. So this is the usable space that I've got available. Now, the solar panels, the Jinko ones, are 103 centimeters wide, and they're 186 centimeters tall. So I managed to squeeze 4 in here. So 4 times 103 is 412 centimeters. So that's brilliant, because I have 430 available. Well, it's not so simple. There's a gap between every panel of approximately 2 centimeters. And this is because you use a bracket to bolt them down. So you need to allow for this gap. At the very ends of the panel, over here, you also have a bracket which holds the panel in place. So that's about another 2 centimeters as well. So you need to add on 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 centimeters in addition to allow for all these clamps and bolts. So the 412 becomes 422 centimeters, 4 meters and 22. So that means I have 8 centimeters to spare. Perfect. In terms of height, the panel's 186 and I've got 212. So I've got 26 centimeters to spare in terms of the height. Now, the majority of, so this is all going to fit perfectly. That's why I chose these panels, right? So it uses up all the roof space I've got without wasting too much, but it fits and it doesn't kind of overhang or anything crazy like that. Now, the majority of solar panels come in a width of around 113 or 114 centimeters. So if I got 3 of those, I would have loads of space left over. And if I got 4 of those, it would overhang the summer house roof and it wouldn't fit. If I changed the orientation to landscape, it was the same problem. It just doesn't fit. And basically, those normal size panels, I can only get 3 of them on. So that's why I didn't stick with Trina, and that's why I had to get a different brand just to get ones which fit in the right size. But that's the gist of it. Now, how did I actually get these fitted? So, our summer house has joists. We have a center joist, that's this red line up here at the top, that's the middle of the summer house between the north and the south elevation. We have the wall on the south side, which is load bearing, so that's equivalent to a joist. And then halfway between the two, we have one joist which runs the length of the summer house. It runs on the underside, of course, but this is the position of the joists. Now, the guidance for solar panels is that you should have a supporting rail in the top 25% and the bottom 25%. The reason for this is that you want the panels to be securely clamped down, but you also want to make sure that if the wind gets under there, it doesn't rip the panel off the roof. So by putting the kind of connectors and the rails in those kind of quadrants gives it a lot of strength. So you can see by the positioning of our existing joists, this one here is perfect. It's in the bottom 25%. But over here we have nothing in the top 25%. The middle one's kind of not really possible, because then to position the panel resting on that, the panel would overhang onto the other side, it would look stupid. The one over here, halfway, is no good because it's halfway, it's not in the top of the bottom quadrant. We could use this rail and bolt the panel down to it, but it's overkill. So what that meant is that we had to buy some wood and create a new joist. So in our summer house, on the underside, we bought some 1x4, like 1x3 or something from Wix, and we just added a joist on the underside of our roof in this position. So now we have got a joist in the top quadrant for the panel, and we can use that. Now, this is just a diagram. The exact positioning might not be completely correct and to scale here, but this new joist was halfway between the middle one there and the middle one over here. So it all looks good and symmetrical. And the positioning on the panels is about right. So this panel probably sits a little bit further down, and it's equidistant top and bottom. Okay, the next thing you need to do then is you need to fit the rails. So this green line I've added on now is a representation of the rails. Now the rails are going to bolt into your roof from the top, and they're going to bolt into these joists or the load-bearing wall, so they've got something to drill into and the screws not sticking out on the underside of your roof. Because as I said, the tile's about 4mm, the wood's less than 1 centimetre, and the screws that we have to put through are something like 7 or 8 centimetres. So we needed something that we can drill into so it can take the weight and provide a lot of strength. So the rails are fitted so that we can drill the supporting screws straight into the joists that we've got there. Now the issue is that our roof is 4.3 meters, but the rails only come in a length of 3.3 meters. Now this is the case for the black ones that I wanted. If you get silver rails, they can come in longer colors, but the black ones, I couldn't find any in a longer length when I was looking. So 3.3 meters was the length, and that meant we needed to do a join. So the first thing before we got these on the roof is we cut from a spare length that I bought, we cut an extra meter of rail and we spliced it together. Now my original plan was to get the rails to fit flush on the roof, and therefore a splice wasn't needed. I can just bolt the other rail into the right place. However, when we got all the stuff delivered and we kind of just prepped, I realised that mounting flush to the roof isn't going to work, because the L brackets supplied to bolt it to the roof, the holes in them for the screws to go weren't in the right place. So it meant I'm going to have to lift up the bracket and not rest it on the roof, and it's going to be lifted up from the roof by about, I don't know, finger length, 1 to 2 centimetres. But that meant I needed now a proper splice to attach these two pieces together so that it has a bit of strength. Now, it was too late to order the splices from Midsummer, because I didn't order them in my initial order. So that's why we ended up going to Wix and buying some brackets and bolts to improvise so that we could get this whole job done over the holidays. Without that, we'd be waiting all the way until January before we could do anything. So the key point here is we spliced it together. It's nothing scientific. It's an angle bracket, and it's a nut and bolt going through the splice and into the rail. That's it. The rail's made of aluminium, so you can drill pilot holes with normal drill bits, no problem. After that, you're going to fit the L brackets to the roof and then clip the rail or bolt the rail to the bracket. So this is the approximate position of the L brackets on the roof. It might not be completely correct, but the key point is the instructions say you should have a bracket about within 1 foot of the end of the rail on each end. So that's what we've done, and the rest are kind of just evenly distributed in the middle. It's not quite even. The reason being is I needed to make sure that I've got some support on either side of this splice, so there isn't load going through the angle bracket, but it's going into the L brackets instead. So it's not completely even, but this is the approximate positioning. It really doesn't matter where the positioning is, as long as you try to get it even and you're drilling into a joist. That is the most important thing, that the screw is all the way through a joist. Okay, the next thing to do after that then is to fit your N-phase microinverters to the rail. So the inverters are fitted face down, so this face you see here will be face down, and these two ports you see here for the cables will be on the left hand side. And when I ordered all the equipment, I ordered a few bolts which fit these rails so that I could bolt them all down. That's it, really simple. When doing that, the inverters have got a serial number. So make note of the serial number of all 4 inverters and the order in which you place them here. You need to know which inverter is going to end up behind which panel, and that's important for later on. So make a note. The serial number is printed on the side of the inverter. What I did is I turned them over on the bracket which attaches to the rail. I just wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I took a photograph of the 1, 2, 3, 4 together with the serial number. So therefore I know which one goes where. The next thing to do then is to connect up the Q cable. So the Q cable is basically just a solar power cable with a proprietary N-phase connector on the end which plugs into these ports on the microinverter. So because I got 4 microinverters, I ordered 4 lengths of the Q cable, and they actually come daisy chained together already, and they just cut the end off over here and over here. So if you had 6 inverters and you order 6 lengths of this, it'll already come pre-daisy chained together in 6 with 6 blocks. So basically it's minimizing the number of joins you have to do yourself by providing their connector. So there's nothing magical about this cable. It is obviously the correctly rated cable, but all it has is the 2 cores inside, positive and negative. Nothing more than that, right? So the first thing you need to do is this short tail that they give you here, you need to cap it off. So there's an N-phase end cap, and what you do is you take off a bit of the outer sheath, and then the 2 cores, which still have their sheath on the inside, they slot into this end cap, and it splits them apart into 2 separate chambers, and that way it keeps them separate, divided by a bit of material, and stops those inner cores from ever making contact with each other. You then put a gland around it to make it tight and waterproof. That's basically all it is, a very simple gadget from N-phase which does the job. Then you connect all of these together, so it's literally plug and play into the AC port, nothing more mind-blowing than that. And then the other end over here, this is the end which you're going to have to connect to your house, to your consumer unit. So that cable goes into a junction box. In the junction box, I just use some Wago connectors to join the Q cable together with a length of flex cable, a 3-core flex that I bought, which will go all the way back to my consumer unit. After that, you need to earth everything. So also inside this junction box, I bought an earth bar, and the earth bar is connected via a bit of earth cable to the rail. It's connected to the second rail, and then it's connected to each of the solar panels. Now the solar panels have pre-drilled holes all the way around the frame where you can earth it. So what I did is I just bought a ring connector to put onto the end of the earth cable, and then nuts and bolts which would fit the pre-drilled holes, and just bolted it into the frame. Now I chose to run earth cables from everywhere I wanted it back to the junction box into the earth bar. You could do it a bit differently, and instead of earthing the solar panel back to the junction box, you could earth the solar panel to the rail, and then the rail's already earthed. I didn't do that because I wasn't sure how well the rail would conduct electricity in the event of there being a problem. I was more comfortable by having a dedicated earth cable running along. So I've probably used a bit more wire. A professional installer might do it differently, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which one of these you choose to use, as long as you've earthed it properly with an appropriately sized cable. But that's basically it. That's all you've got to do on the roof. The next thing to do is to put your solar panels onto the roof. So here are the solar panels on the roof, and then those clamps, you position them in between. They kind of sit on top of the edge of the solar panel and have it bolted down. And once I've done all of that, that's all of your exterior work basically done. And the next thing I did is go to the inside and connect up the electrics. So that cable from the roof, here it is. It comes in, the 3-core flex. It goes into a 32 amp isolator, and then the cable comes out from there and goes into our consumer unit, which we had in the summer house. On the cable between the isolator and the consumer unit, I've attached the My Energy Production CT clamp, and that is basically it. The fuse that I used was a Contactum MCB-C 10 amp fuse. It's a Contactum because my fuse board is made by Contactum, It's an MCB-C because that is exactly what my original solar array is fused by. So this is where maybe the technicalities get a bit beyond me. So I just copied what my existing installer's done, but what I did do is reduce the ampage of this fuse down to 10 amps. My existing one is actually 20 amps. And let me explain why. So here are my power calculations. The 4 solar panels on the roof can produce a maximum of 380 watts. So times that by 4, a maximum of 1520 watts in the most perfect conditions. 1520 watts divided by 230 volts means that the maximum output is 6.61 amps. Okay, in the best possible conditions, the maximum output is 6.61 amps. And we know that solar panels never really ever achieve their maximum, right? So this is a theoretical max. So it's a 10 amp fuse because 10 amps is above the 6.61, and whatever the next size down would have been lower than this number. So even though I don't think we'll ever hit this number, just to be on the safe side, that's why I put 10 amps. Now, my original array is fused with a 20 amp fuse. If you did the equivalent calculations, it's not enough. But I think what my electrician decided is because half the panels are working at any one moment and they're not all going to ever be working together, a 20 amp fuse was sufficient. The isolator is 32 amps. The reason it's 32 amps is because that is one of the lowest size that it comes in, but actually the 32 amps in this case means that it can fuse or isolate 32 amps of current. So it's rated for, whatever that is, 6-7 times more than it needs to be. Okay. The cable, the 3-core flex cable, this one, which connects from the junction box on the roof, comes into the isolator and goes into the fuse box. That cable is 2.5 millimeter cable rated for 25 amps. So Enphase has a calculator on their website which will help you calculate the correct size cable. So I used that, and it came to basically the same conclusion I had figured out by myself. So this is the right size cable for this kind of array with this amount of inverters connected to and this kind of current. There is a balance to be struck. If you put too thick a cable, more voltage is required to push the current along, and you end up with a voltage drop. If you have too small a cable, then it can't cope with the amount of current and will kind of overheat and trip out, which is also dangerous. So the calculations say 2.5 is the right size, and usually most things which are kind of coming in contact with humans or doing things like that, you normally have to get something which is rated 4 to 5 times more than it actually needs to be. That's kind of a mechanical rule of thumb. So if we have 6 amps as the maximum we'll ever put through, the cable's rated for 25 amps. So that's 4 times more than it ever needs to be. So anyway, this is all the right stuff, and I did call Enphase to kind of run through everything just to make sure I haven't made a mistake before I started, and they kind of verified everything I'm doing seems to be about right. I also had the same discussion with Midsummer when I was ordering the equipment, just to be sure I hadn't forgotten to order something. But that is the gist on my cabling. After that, you've got everything on your roof connected up. If you switched on this isolator, it should start producing power and work. Simple as that. But so that you know what's going on and whether it's working or not, that's what these CTs are about. So I installed this production CT over here for my energy. I had one kicking around in the house spare, but if you had to buy one, they're about £15. But it needs to be hardwired to my energy setup, which is obviously in the main portion of our house. Now, I could get another Harvey to wirelessly beam the signal, but I didn't really want to pay another £50 or whatever for a Harvey when I've got one with spare slots, but I just can't get the cables to reach. What I figured out is that you can extend CT clamps using regular Ethernet cable, and we do have wired Ethernet cable in our summer house connected to our main switch in the house. And one of the cores are in use, but the other one's doing nothing, because smart thing to do is always put 2 cables in the wall when you're drilling holes. So I had a spare cable there. So that takes me from the summer house back to the portion of the house where we keep the switch. Then from there, what I did is ran another cable from there into the loft. And then in the loft, we already have my energy CT clamp measuring the production from our existing array. So I used the spare cores in that Ethernet cable, which goes back down to the eddy to allow the eddy to now have the additional information for this new solar array. So there are 3 joins in the cable, and that's not ideal, but I did it and it seems to work, so fantastic. It hasn't cost me anything. Now, in the loft I did actually have a CT clamp measuring the battery, but the eddy's only got 2 slots, which are both used up. So I had to relocate that CT clamp for the battery downstairs where the consumer unit is, the main one, and put that CT clamp around the wire in the consumer unit for the give energy system, and then connect it to the Harvey to wirelessly beam the signal back to the eddy. So a bit of jiggery pokery here to make it all work, but that's how I got the CT clamps hooked up. So now we need to do a little bit of configuring in the Enphase Enlighten system. So when I was doing my research, I learnt that you can create yourself an Enphase installer account. They don't require any proof or anything to get it done. You just go to Enphase Enlighten, where you would log in as the consumer, and you create an account and say that you want to be an installer. And what that does is get you access to all the back-end configuration. And then what I did is I went into my consumer account and gave my installer account permission. So now my installer account can see all of my own home, and I can see all the back-end configuration that my actual installer set up and can control. Now I like this because I like to configure my own settings, but I also like to learn how things work. So seeing all the settings under the hood was very interesting. So first of all, let me explain to you, it's completely legit to create an installer account. Enphase don't mind. I've spoken to them about it. You can also create a self-install account because Enphase allow people to self-install their equipment. Keep in mind that I'm not a qualified electrician or solar installer, but I do consider myself to be competent, so I decided to give this a go. So once you've logged in and given yourself access, what you need to do is go to the system cog and go to the devices tab. You'll then be presented with a screen like this with a list of all of your microinverters. So I have blanked out my existing serial numbers. Further down, what you'll find is an add microinverter section. So in this menu here, you select the gateway. It's just going to have the serial number of your existing Envoy gateway. You type in the serial number of the microinverter. Remember, you made a note of it when you were fitting them on the roof, and then you press provision. 10-15 seconds later, it will appear on this list. Repeat that 3 times and you've got your 4 microinverters added to the array. Simple as that. If you're doing this during the daytime and they're already able to communicate, then this status should go to normal pretty quick to confirm that the microinverter is able to talk to your gateway. If there is a problem, or it's kind of late in the day where you're running out of light, like I found that 3 of my microinverters checked in straight away, but the 4th one didn't check in. It was reporting an error, like it's not working, but I did nothing, and the next morning by 8:30, when there was more light, it had enough power to then check in with the gateway. So all of them go to normal status, and everything has worked. That's basically how you add microinverters into your system. There's no other configuration to do. The microinverter figures out all of these other parameters and information all by itself. So the next thing you need to do is to go to your array builder and create your new solar array in that little diagram. So you go to settings again, click on array builder. Click on this blue button over here. Now I've already updated my existing array. If you recall from my earlier screenshots, they were called front, front 2 and back. So I've renamed them I've combined front and front 2 into one array and called it the east array, and I've put the compass heading. My array on the back of the house, I've renamed it to the west array and put the compass heading. And I've already added in the new array, which I've called the south array on the summer house. But I'll explain to you how I did it. So you click on array builder. A plus icon is going to appear in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. Click on that. This pop-up is then going to appear. First of all, name your array. Then choose how many solar panels you need in rows and columns. Choose whether you want them in portrait or landscape mode. The azimuth is your compass heading. I've left that at 180 because I want mine to look in this orientation in the diagram. I don't have to scroll or zoom in, zoom out to see everything, but if you want it to be accurate, then you can correct the azimuth to the real compass heading. So in my case, it would be 216 degrees. My south-facing array is not completely south, it's slightly southwest, so it's 216 degrees. And you can set the tilt. So my summer house has a roof angle of 18 degrees. In the UK, 30 degrees is the most optimal. So again, it's not perfect, but whatever it's doing helps me massively. So once you've put that in, you press add. Then what you're going to do is you're going to end up somewhere in your array box, in your array builder, an empty carcass like this. So first of all, you can drag the whole thing around to where you want it to be orientated in relation to the rest of your panels. And then what you do is you click on the first empty grey panel. This button down here will change from edit to assign. Click on assign, and then you're going to be presented with a list of the serial numbers for all your microinverters. Choose the serial number for the microinverter which is located behind this panel. So you remember earlier on I said it's important to take a note of specifically which microinverter you've placed behind which panel. This is why. This is how the whole system knows exactly which panel is producing what amount of power. So repeat that 3 more times, and then you've got your microinverters assigned to the panel. Then somewhere on the screen at the top there's a save button, press that, you're done. That's it, there's nothing more to do. Enphase is fully configured, and your app and your web browser and item will start to report all of the correct data and the new data based on your new array. And you can see the usual panel by panel information. It's really easy. I was surprised how easy this was to do. I didn't need any help from Enphase, but I did call customer support before I did any of this just to run through to make sure I'm not crazy, and they were really, really helpful. Now, one thing they helped me with is Enphase microinverters communicate with the Enphase Envoy via power line communication. So they send data across your existing electricity cables through your house. They don't have a CT clamp or an Ethernet cable doing the communication. Now, Enphase says this is designed to work up to 50 meters away. Now, the run from my summer house all the way to my loft where I have the Envoy is about 50 meters. But I have about 3 consumer units and a Henley block in that circuit. It's not a straight run. So there's a risk that these new microinverters couldn't communicate. But the good thing about Enphase is it's a kind of plug and play, keep bolting things on kind of system. So the lady from customer support said, what I can do is just get the microinverters, plug them in, and see if it works. If it doesn't work, I can buy a second Envoy later on, and then I can come back to this page and I can tell the whole system that those 4 microinverters need to communicate with the second Envoy that I've bought rather than the first one. The Envoys communicate using Wi-Fi across to the internet, so all the data will get aggregated in the cloud and still report the right thing. So that was a good bit of help. It basically saved me having to purchase a second Envoy up front. It saved me about 200 something pounds. That's the cost of the standard Envoy, which was a fantastic bit of advice. And as you can see, all my microinverters are communicating properly. I've not had any problems. It took them about 24 hours to kind of start checking in normally and get their firmwares updated, all that kind of stuff. But since then, it's been absolutely brilliant. They've been working just as good as all the existing microinverters. So that's literally all you had to do to get the whole system up and running and configured. I was shocked at how easy it was. I didn't have any problems at all in doing this. So let's take a look at the new array diagram. Here is what it looks like. Here are the 4 new solar panels down here at the bottom on my south array, and they produced about 4.5 kilowatts in the last few days in December. Let's look at some pictures then. The final thing we did was install bird mesh. So as I said, my original plan was to get the panel to sit on the rail flush with the roof. That way there was no space for any birds or rodents to get underneath. But because the panel had to sit slightly higher on a bracket, there was a bit of space there, and therefore we needed bird mesh. Now, bird mesh is really expensive stuff. It comes in like a 30-meter reel. It's like 50 to 100 pounds, and we were going to have loads of this stuff left over and spare. So I didn't really want to swallow that kind of expenditure. And what we had lying around in the garage was a bit of chicken mesh. It was green in colour, so I bought some black spray paint. I spray painted it black a few days ahead, and then I cut it to size using some kind of wire cutters, and then we fitted it to the roof. The clips to hold them on, you can just about make them out. They're over here. They're basically like cable ties with a washer on the end. So the cable ties are designed to hook onto the underside of the panel, no drilling or anything required. You then poke the cable tie through the bird mesh, and then you fit this washer from the outside. As you tighten it up, it's like a cable tie, it's one way, it's not coming loose again. So I got a pack of these from Amazon and I just went round and I did it all. It probably took no more than 20 minutes to bird mesh this whole thing. It's really, really easy and really, really simple. And the chicken wire stuff is kind of bendy, a bit like the actual bird mesh, so I can kind of create a nice angle and kind of get it all to size. So that's a cheap way of doing bird mesh. You can use a bit of chicken wire and cut it to size. I suppose if you haven't got any lying around, then you may as well just buy the bird mesh. But you know, we didn't want to have all this spare stuff left over. The other finishing touches I did was put these rubber end caps on. So with the black rails, I think black panels, black rails, black bird mesh, it all looks really smart rather than having a mixture of colours. And so I just got end caps just to, one, stop you from cutting your hands on the sharp edges. Even though we filed it down after cutting it, this just makes it look a bit more tidy. Now, on the main portion of our roof, the installers used silver rails. In hindsight, I wish they'd used black because it looks smarter, and they didn't put any end caps on, so you can see from the ground it just doesn't look as smart as what I've done here. So finer details here, but this is where I say some of the installers are not kind of thinking of doing a quality job, they're just trying to get the jobs bashed out quickly. A detail to talk about then is these clamps. This is a mid clamp. It's designed to go between panels. It's perfect. This is a universal clamp. It's designed to go at the end of the panel, or it can function in the middle of the panel. Right? It's a one size fits all. Now I didn't want this. They make a dedicated end clamp which has a lower profile. I would have preferred that, but they didn't have any in stock, and these were available. So they were the same price. They sent me these instead. Now my issue with these is that they kind of stick out a lot more, and they don't seem to be as kind of stable compared to the dedicated one. So in hindsight, if I was doing something differently and I had all the time in the world, I definitely would not order these universal clamps. I don't like them at all. I would prefer to order dedicated mid and end clamps. You can see from earlier I said I'll have 8 centimeters spare, and here is literally the 8 centimeters of rail that we have spare. So my measurements were exactly right. I could cut that down a little bit more, but you know, we were tired at the end of the day. Now I said that I did this myself, so like I said, I'm not qualified, but I consider myself to be competent. In my opinion, there was nothing more complicated in terms of drilling a few holes in the roof. I put a bit of silicone in the hole, and then the L brackets come with a rubber seal which also acts as waterproofing. So I double waterproofed this thing. Yeah, drilled a few holes, put a new joist to support the weight, fitted some rails. This is nothing more than nuts and bolts. It's like playing with Lego at the end of the day, and fitting the solar panels on, right? You just got to be careful that you don't bash them. They're made of glass at the end of the day. Connecting up all the wires in my mind is simple. The panels come with connectors which go in the N-phase microinverters. The microinverters come with connectors which connect them all together. So I don't have to do anything, just plug all these cables in. The wiring that I had to do was, on one end of the cable I just had to fit the N-phase end cap, and the way they've designed it makes it as easy as you possibly can to make that safe. And the other end I had to do a bit of wiring to connect the other end of the N-phase cable into the junction box, and then connect that down to the fuse box. But all we're talking about is the 3 cores, the live, the neutral, and the earth. So as long as you can keep your head around those 3 things, join them together using the appropriate connectors and not jumble them up, then there's nothing too scientific about this. Yes, I've messed around in my consumer unit. An electrician will tell you I'm not allowed to do so. Like I say, it's my own house. It's a summer house. It's detached from the rest of our house. So if something goes wrong, then it's only the summer house which is going to burn down, and there's nothing valuable in there. But you know, I've used the right cables. I've done it all properly. I made sure before I opened that thing up that I'd isolated it. We have 3 ways of isolating that box. So I'd isolated them all, and then before I touched anything, I put a multimeter to all the terminals to be absolutely sure there was no voltage coming through, and then I stuck my fingers in and started doing something. But that is basically the gist. So this is our new expenditure, £1,875, well spent, DIY job. Everything went perfectly first time around, and the solar panels are already making a useful dent by capturing sunlight directly pointing at it and helping us out in that middle portion of the day when the ones on the roof are not really working because the sun's off at the wrong angle for them. So like, subscribe, comment. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found it useful. And be sure to get qualified advice if you want any of this equipment. Don't try it yourself at home. Alright guys, catch you in the next video.